And every point of the cycle has a positive angle. So now it's a great time to, it's tough for fundraising, it's tough for liquidity, great time to invest. Now is the time to invest.
Well, Eric, it's a pleasure to have you here in Argentina. You are a legend in the VC industry in Latam. One of the first VCs, actually. When did you start it and why?
Started in 2005. So it's been 19 years. But before I'll tell you why, first I want to thank you for the invitation to be here. It's a real pleasure, especially sharing the panel with you, good friend, many years, you know, of helping build the Latin American tech VC industry. And I have also to thank you for doing this in English. You know, I always feel bad I come here and I don't do it in Spanish, but I have to tell you, you remember there was a previous investment forum that I was invited here in Buenos Aires, and I was part of this panel, and I came and I thought it was in English, and then 5 minutes before the panel, they told me, it's going to be in Spanish, okay? And I said, oh, okay, well, I can speak Portuñol, it's going to be fine, right? Oh, how wrong I was. So thank you very much.
That's because you're not Argentinian. We speak very good in Portuñol. So, no, a pleasure to have you here again and in this new era. And I think it's important, very important for Argentina to talk a little bit about Brazil and the evolution of the two ecosystems. And you are sort of a bridge between those two ecosystems. So I was asking, why did you start it as a VC? When? It was a long time ago, but why? And then about the evolution, I want to ask you.
No, sure. So we started, I co-founded Monashees together with my co-founder Fabio Igo in 2005. We were both passionate about helping entrepreneurs, you know, build tech companies. And in my trajectory before, I really thought about starting an early stage VC inspired by the best practices of Silicon Valley, because I worked with tech investments at General Atlantic. I joined General Atlantic in '99.
Wow.
And worked there for a few years, and that was my kind of school. And through GA, General Atlantic, that had co-investments with the best funds in Silicon Valley, you know, Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins at the time. So I had a glimpse of Silicon Valley. And I thought, well, technology is only going to accelerate, even after the crash. We knew technology was accelerating. The other conviction is that Brazil and Latin America have an incredible entrepreneurial energy, so our region was going to be a fertile ground for tech VC. And the third conviction, we knew it was going to take time. So we were prepared for a long cycle. And we started in 2005 in the middle of what was kind of a nuclear winter of tech around the world, and especially here in Latin America.
Well, I remember, we talked a lot. You started like in '97. I started in 1999 working with entrepreneurs. At that moment, I was a lawyer for 15 years. And I remember in the early 2000, in an operational deal where a Brazilian VC was trying to invest with a strange name, by the way, Monashees. So for us, it was something very, very peculiar. And not long time ago, you mentioned it in a conversation why you have invested at that moment. Why that decision from Brazil to invest in an Argentinian company at that moment?
Well, when we started in 2005 in Brazil, we were Brazilians with Brazilian investors looking at Brazil. It didn't make sense to look outside of Brazil also because, as you know, Brazil is a large market in a large country. You can build large companies only looking at the Brazilian market. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to, at that time, to look abroad. And you counted on your fingers of one hand the success cases of pan-regional Latam companies that were successful. Mercado Libre was, you know, Meli was starting to grow. But I had met Marcos Galperin from my time in General Atlantic, And of course, we knew about all the others, Despegar and Globant and all the other great companies in Argentina. And actually, the Argentinian tech hub and tech community and ecosystem was much more developed than the Brazil community at the time. So after 3 years, we started in 2005, and after 3 years trying to find companies to invest in Brazil, and they were not like high-impact entrepreneurs, that mindset. Entrepreneurs didn't understand what venture capital was. So basically, you would talk to them and tell them, hey, I want to help you with a fair valuation and a minority stake and a long-term partnership. And they would say, oh, okay, where's the catch? Where's the catch here? It's too much. But in Argentina, I think there was more of this open mindset. So we came to learn. We came in 2008 to learn. And I told you the story. One of our colleagues at Monashees actually found out about Emiliano Kargman and John Eitzel that had started Aconcagua Ventures at the time, and they were entrepreneurs at Core Security Technologies. And this colleague said, reached out and said, hey, we would love to go there and talk to you about tech. And so we took a first trip in 2008 to Buenos Aires. And I told you there that we said, hey, how we should dress for this meeting. And we said, oh, no, maybe, somebody said, no, in Argentina, things are more formal. So we came with our jackets there for the meeting, and Emiliano and Johnny were already Silicon Valley guys here. It was an interesting meeting,
so
but that's
like
how it started.
The tax agency, you were. Okay, amazing. And what happened? Because fast forward, now the Brazilian ecosystem is like having Silicon Valley 3 hours from Argentina, a lot of funds, amazing entrepreneurs, a lot of IPOs. How that happened, and what's the difference between Argentina and what we could learn from that evolution from the Brazilian ecosystem, which is much bigger than the Argentinian now?
It is. I think it's a combination of factors. Everything is there's a lot of serendipity on these things. I think the Brazilian tech ecosystem really took off around 2010 because Brazil was already part of the BRIC countries at the time. So there was some interest in Brazil. Brazil was surfing the commodities wave. The economy was growing very much. And actually, there was a first generation of founders, of foreign entrepreneurs that chose Brazil to start their companies. Not a lot of people talk about this, but that was very important to actually bring the high-impact entrepreneurship mindset to Brazil. And they chose Brazil, in my opinion, because of the size of the market. At that time, it's very important, as I said, to remember that pan-regional expansion was tough. We were skeptical about it. And we said, no, so you have to build a company, you only think about expanding after you really consolidate the company in the country. So you need for these very ambitious entrepreneurs, you needed a larger market. And so I think for all these reasons, foreign founders, foreign entrepreneurs, and Brazilian repatriates chose Brazil. And so there was this first generation of Brazilian and foreign entrepreneurs building companies in Brazil around 2010, 12, 13, that represented the first generation of world-class tech companies of this new era. Even though from the late 90s, as we said, when there was not a lot of capital, when there was no industry, Argentina was basically the best ecosystem. But again, I think, as we discussed with our LPs, it's great to be here today and see the positive vibe, and everything. I think Argentina has an incredible vocation for tech and innovation. But of course, we can't ignore that macro gets in the way up to a certain extent. So I think it also, in my opinion, helped Brazil in that first moment.
Okay, and what's the impact that regulation could have? For example, what's happening with the fintech industry in Brazil, which is absolutely amazing. Well, how can you explain that?
Yeah.
And maybe what we could learn.
Sure. First, just to comment on my previous answer, it's important to say that besides the founders, which I mentioned the founders because they are basically the stars and they are responsible for the success of the not the success of the ecosystem, because I think we're still proving it, but it's the development of the ecosystem. But we also had, of course, the first Silicon Valley VCs that looked at Brazil at the time. So Benchmark, Accel, Insight, Bessemer, they invested at that time, they looked at Brazil. And LPs, international LPs, also looked at Brazil and looked at us. I think we were fortunate to be at the right time, at the right place, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So we were there, and then LPs actually wanted to diversify into Brazil and Latin America, and we had access to international LPs. So that was very important. So this combination of the founders and then co-investors that were very knowledgeable about tech and LPs. Now, to your question on the regulation. Again, I have to tell you, it's easier to analyze, ex post and look back and say, oh, well, this happened and that happened. We have a lot of specialists that analyze the past. I have to tell you, I'm surprised with what happened. If we had this conversation in 2010 and you asked me about, what about regulation? I was going to say, oh, I'm very skeptical regulation. Regulation in Latin America and Brazil has always regulated in favor of incumbents. Never regulated in favor of startups, competition, innovation. So what happened in the last 10, 15 years, it's been a great, great surprise in Brazil. And I think we had an incredible, on fintech especially, incredible central bank, independent central bank with great leadership that created the conditions that were a surprise, with everything that's happening in terms of not only the regulation, but more recently, of course, PIX and digital payments and open banking that really create a great platform for fintech companies. And today we can see that some incredible companies were built, and Brazil became an example to other countries in terms of positive regulation, especially in fintech. But we can't ignore that there were some examples. I'm not going to get into them here. But there were positive examples in health, there were positive examples in mobility, there were positive examples in other sectors too.
Amazing. So maybe going out a little bit about Brazil. You are one of the few funds that are also investing outside Brazil. First, why? And second, how do you see LATAM and Argentina, of course?
Yeah, we started, as I said, as a Brazil fund, focused on Brazil. We only had, for the first 10 years, we only invested in Brazil, in Brazilian companies. With the exception of those companies in Argentina that we wanted to learn, but it was not a strategy to invest a lot in Argentina at the time. But then starting around 2015, we saw more and more successful pan-regional companies. The first one we invested was Rappi, in the seed round, and we saw the potential. It was different for us, and we saw, hey, innovation can really happen anywhere. Pan-regional expansion is a reality because the integration among countries is happening. Before, you remember that each country was a completely different, isolated island. The founders didn't really talk to each other, didn't share knowledge. And today we have an integrated industry. The VC industry became more mainstream. You talk to a high-impact founder in Brazil, in Indonesia, or in Europe. I mean, they speak the same language, and also venture capital. And so when that started to happen, we said, no, let's change our strategy, and we became a pan-regional fund. And we raised our next funds, focusing on, we opened an office in Mexico City as the second largest market in the region. And we started to invest more in Colombia, Mexico, and Argentina. And then more recently, as I told you, we are seeing great examples of Latin American entrepreneurs, and we're totally, huge fans of Latin American entrepreneurs. In a way, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere in the world. So there's a lot of talent. And so we are also investing in Latin American entrepreneurs, building global companies outside of LATAM. So we became what we call a global LATAM-focused fund. And in terms of Argentina, we have a portfolio here of of great companies, that we partnered with great founders, Pomelo and Voila and Coder House, so we're very, very proud of the partnership with companies Satellogic in the past with Mariano. And very happy and looking actively for, increasing our portfolio here.
And about LATAM, do you see, maybe in some of the panels they mentioned something, Damian and others, what's happening in China? Do you think that could have an impact in the region? Not? What do you think?
Yes, what's happening in China is so unique. It's the only country, in my opinion, that built a very sophisticated tech VC ecosystem in 15 years. And then for, I don't know, their reasons, geopolitical or whatever, the government is taking action to actually, reduce that activity. We looked at China and we had some great exits to Chinese companies. So 99, the ride-hailing company, was acquired by Didi in 2018, which was our first big exit, 12 years after we started. We also had companies acquired by Baidu and by Syngenta, which is a China company, so it's all Chinese. So we always saw China as, hey, it's great to build some companies in the region that can also have some competition for M&A between, US companies and Chinese companies. And besides, we always saw China as having some cases like, Meituan, Pinduoduo, and a few other companies and Didi as examples for more kind of tech-enabled companies for emerging markets. So we proactively looked for building bridges with China, starting in 2013. We took, in 2016, 55 founders of our portfolio to China to learn, and that was incredible impact on our portfolio. So we learned a lot, we thought it was incredible, but now it's a new reality. And that new reality, on one hand, we have, Chinese LPs too, but on one hand, it's probably going to limit some of the investments by, Chinese LPs or companies in Latin America, I don't know. But on the other hand, it's also Latin America as a significant, today a relevant region that's on the map of tech. It creates an opportunity because a lot of investors that were investing heavily in China from the US, Europe, Middle East, they're looking for other regions. And Latin America has built a growing, still need a lot to do, but sophisticated ecosystem that will be able to attract part of this capital. So it has some, as anything in life, some pros and cons of what's happening there.
Whenever I'm pessimistic, I call Derek and listen to him because he's like a preacher of LATAM. What else can you tell us about why LATAM?
Well, there are so many reasons. We discussed some of them now. I think above all, the most important thing is the talent, is the quality of entrepreneurs, the resilience, the creativity. I think it's when we meet other entrepreneurs, we have to start from scratch. You have to remember, the ecosystem that's really mature is the US. It has been through at least 50 years and several cycles to really form those entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs become, angel investors and become VCs too. And so you after 5 cycles, they started, technically the first VC fund in the US was Sequoia and Kleiner in 1972. So it's more than 50 years. So in that way, we are halfway through a second 10-year cycle in the region. There's so much to be built. So we are equivalent to the 80s in the US in terms of sophistication of the ecosystem. So when you see what was built in the last 14 years, 15 years, and the quality, the first generation of world-class companies, the talent, the region, of course, that has, 650 million people with, income per capita higher than the other emerging markets, passion for technology. And a last thing, I know we're running out of time, But something I always like to remember, at least in the case of Brazil and other countries in Latin America, some other emerging markets, when we compare Latin America to other emerging markets are actually starting a lot of things from scratch. We had an economic boom in Brazil, for example, in the 70s that was very strong. I think the region created a dynamic private sector, created a legal framework for the private sector, that we're not starting from scratch. You know, even though we like to criticize and a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of problems, of course, I always joke, I say, for entrepreneurs, a problem is an opportunity. So we are in the land of opportunities here in Latin America. But when we look at the good things, we're not starting from scratch. We have incredible, you know, an incredible private sector, and we're building from there. And the tech entrepreneurship and startups, this is a new thing for us. And in 10, 15 years, we were able to play the Champions League and generate some companies that are playing the Champions League. And that's remarkable. So I think when we look at this, and last thing I'm gonna say, because we ran out of time, is that we try to think that when things are going really well, we think it's gonna last forever. You know, not everybody, but it's a tendency. When things are not that good, we tend to think it's gonna last forever. Everything is cyclical. And every point of the cycle has a positive angle. So now it's a great time it's tough for fundraising, it's tough for liquidity. Great time to invest. Now is the time to invest. I think you all know that. So you have to look at the positives and wait for the cycle. I think the next up cycle for Latin America is going to be amazing because we have companies that are getting increasingly better. We have these second, third generation entrepreneurs, proven entrepreneurs, experienced entrepreneurs. So it's going to be much better than the previous cycle. And in every cycle, we're going to build a much better ecosystem.
Amazing, Eric. Well, we are going to have a glimpse of some entrepreneurs in the afternoon and some other VC. So really excited about VC in LATAM and, of course, in Argentina. Thank you very much, Eric. Big round of applause.
Thank you very much.